Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today we're doing another book review, and today we're doing this one, which is Diddly Squat, Pigs Might Fly. Now you've probably seen my other Jeremy Clarkson one added to the channel, and if you haven't already, you can check the link in the description, or you can head over to the channel and find that book review, which was his other newest one. I can't remember what it's called, so to do with cows. Till the Cows Come Home, that was it. Jeremy is quite the writer. He is a very smart man, and what I love about his writing is that he really gets to the point. And in his last book, Till the Cows Come Home, it was about understanding how important the farmer is. Now in this one, it isn't quite the same. When I read this one, it was a little bit different to the past two Diddly Squat follow-ups. But Jeremy's last two books in the Diddly Squat series is that this one doesn't really compete with the other two, because I feel like Till the Cows Come Home really explained about how important the farmer was and how we should be backing the farmer. Whereas the first book was about understanding his struggles and how he made little money in the first year of farming. But this one, however, is quite interesting because I feel like it didn't really talk too much about farming in general. And although he's just got pigs, which we'll find out in the newest series of Diddly Squat at this time of recording, is that the pigs he doesn't really talk a lot about. I think it's more so because they're quite easy to keep. So what I wanted to cover in this one is some of the subjects that he's talked about in this book and how important those subjects are as a whole, but it's like very loosely based on the farm and how things are related in the sense of, you know, the farmhouse or eco-farming like he talks about and all those sorts of things. So if you get anything from this, make sure you like and subscribe. Let's dig deeper into it. Now what I love about this book is the illustrations. You can see the illustrations in this really do paint a picture of what he's going through on the farm, which I think is absolutely fantastic. So I'll just show you some of the contents in here. Obviously we go through, as per usual in the Diddly Squat series, he goes through all of the seasons. So in here are the topics that he talks about. So green-winged testicles. You'll honestly have to read that one to understand what that's about. Breakheart Maestro. Give My Little Man a Call. And then we move to autumn, where there's Free from the Sun. That's a very interesting one, and we'll dig deeper into that one. True Heaven is a Place on Earth. A Twitcher's Lament. David Cameron Murdered My Tractor. That is literally what it says on the tin. I've become an eco-farmer and Caleb hates it. Winter. Lisa is Armed and Dangerous. That's a funny one. And then we have Bleak House. Another Fine Mess. Now I'm Becoming the Destroyer of the World. Walking the Dog. He's not digging deeper into the actual farming itself, but loosely basing it around things around the farm, literally walking the dogs. Then we have Spring, which is Environmental Donuts, a thing that seems very thingish, a total pig's ear of it, Lady Garden, and I Can't Explain. Then we go to Summer, which is Let Them Eat Soup, and then In Praise of Goats. So you can obviously see that the next one is that he's going to get goats on the farm, which is going to be quite exciting, and I can't wait for that to actually happen. Right, now I'm not going to go into all the chapters, but I'm just going to go into a few chapters that I think are worth pointing out. Now this is the first one that we come to, which is Give My Little Man a Call. Obviously, we know with the Grand Tour that he does, they've always got explicit names where like it means something ruder when it doesn't mean it at all. But this is kind of one of those things, isn't it? That's a classic Jeremy. But I'm just going to read the first part of this, and I think it's very important that we understand what he's talking about here, because I don't think it's the farming itself that he's talking about in general, but more so the fact understanding what is going on in the world at this current moment. So I'm just going to read this one. So, now that we know it costs £11 million to heat our house this winter, and that we won't be able to afford to pay it because our monthly mortgage repayments will be bigger than the gross domestic product of Switzerland, many commentators are offering handy tips on how to save money. You should put on an extra jumper, they say, and burn litter if you want to stay warm. You should glue your teeth together so you don't waste money on food, and if you do, by some miracle need the lavatory, you should wipe your bottom with a smooth stone to save on bog roll. It all sounds very uncomfortable and horrid, but happily, I have an easy and actually quite pleasant way of saving yourself an absolute fortune. Simply remove from your life every single luxury brand name. So then Jeremy talks about how Lisa goes into designer shops and spends thousands of pounds on things that you could literally find in Primark for the same sort of thing. But what he's saying in this one is that he goes into antique shops and he looks at antiques rather than brand new things because it costs cheaper and yet you have nicer things. That's what he's saying in this chapter. So we skip forward quite a considerable amount where I join up here. So God, there are some bargains to be had, and antiques, because they have been made in the 18th century, are available now, and they don't have to be made. That's what he's saying in that. So this whole chapter is based around how we should be buying locally sourced things, and things that have already been made, because what he's trying to state in here is that the backlog of things since literally lockdown, of where wood prices went ridiculously high, and cost of materials for certain things went ridiculously high, is that we should be buying second-hand things that don't cost a lot of money because they're already made. So he talks about antiques and how he goes antique shopping. But that's a very good point, because a lot of people are buying new things all the time, aren't they? And they're replacing things with newer things. But what he's stating in this particular chapter is the fact that he goes to antique shops and buys things that are already made and ready to go as well. You're not waiting around for it to be produced. And that's what he's saying here. But I think we can think of that in a sort of recycling type of way, isn't it? We're using older things because they're already here. We're not using extra wood or new wood to make new things. We are literally buying something that's already made. And I think that was a very good point in this chapter. But like I said, it's not really farming related, is it? But what he's saying in this is that he's got someone in the Cotswolds who can actually refurbish old things that he finds and likes to put in his new farmhouse. That's what he's stating in this chapter. So like I said, it's very loosely based around the farming. Now we come to this chapter, which is called Free from the Sun. Now this doesn't really represent anything until we get into the chapter, but this is actually a really good picture of what it's about. Can you guess what it's about? Let's get into it. So basically he's talking about water companies and how there's a lot of raw sewage being pumped into seas and streams, and like the Thames in London. Literally all of these water companies are really struggling to clean up the mess that has been allowed by the government of dumping sewage in the sea. Now what's interesting is that Jeremy covers the topic of this, but then he moves it onto a farm-related point. So let's read this extract here. Water companies are having a spot of bother at the moment. It seems that they are all allowing our drinking water to escape into the earth because they're too busy filling every picturesque trout stream with turds, while coating every South Coast surfer with a thicker veneer of human effluent. Again, he really paints a picture with his words, doesn't he? Even if it is a grim one. Needless to say, the nation's beach dudes, wild swimmers and fishermen are not terribly happy about this state of affairs, and are consequently rushing about saying that the water company bosses should hand back their £1 billion salaries and then walk naked through the town centre while people throw vegetables at them and chant shame. Again, that is quite funny, isn't it? The way that he paints it. But the bigger point that he's trying to get to here is that there is a big overflow of sewage. What he's bringing to our attention is the fact that there's so many turds basically hanging around. They have to put it into the seas. They have to put it into the Thames. They have to put it into these rivers to almost stop the backlog of, pardon the pun, the backlog of what's happening in all of the sewers, because they cannot contain the amount of turds that everyone's flushing away. So what he's saying here is, what else can we do with them? And this is where it begins to get interesting, because he says that chemicals for the farm are literally thousands of pounds now, when they were only like a couple of £100 a few years ago. But the real interesting thing that he's getting to here is that you can buy fertiliser in bags. You can buy all of these minerals to put on the ground in bags. So why not use the ability to use human turds to be able to use that as fertiliser on his farmland? Now he goes into a tangent of how it can be good, but then it can be bad as well. And the chapter is called Free from the Sun. And there's something to do with that saying of how far away it has to be from humankind before it's allowed to be, what am I trying to say here? Is that if human faeces were used as fertiliser instead of all of the animal muck that is put out onto the ground instead, The fact that animal feces aren't as close to human feces, where we wouldn't get diseases if it was spread on, say, a field full of crop. Now, what he's saying in this chapter is that you could probably use it for something else. Perhaps you could use it to plant something else that we're not going to eat. Therefore, it's not going to get contaminated. The fact that we know what has gone into an animal, of what it's eaten and how it's been brought up and all of that sort of thing, to know what's coming out of it. But to then think that if you did the same with a human, you don't know what medication someone's had. You don't know what drugs they've put into their bodies, to then have the extract of that in their feces, to then spread that on, say, fresh veg that you want to eat yourself. So it's also understanding how that could play a part in how things are grown, and how that could be dangerous in a certain sense, but not so bad if you were growing something else. But overall, I think the point that he's getting at here is quite an interesting one. The point that I'm trying to get at here is the fact that he's really covering a broad subject that probably a lot of people hadn't have thought of, and that's what I really like about his writing. Anyway, let's move on to... well, I'll just show you that one because I'm not going to explain what that one's about. Is literally David Cameron murdered his tractor. Not his Lamborghini, don't worry, super fans, but it was his little one, his little Massey Ferguson. And literally David Cameron borrowed, I don't know why, David Cameron borrowed his tractor for something and it literally blew up. So that's a spoiler alert. Anyway, this is what I mean when I talk about things that aren't really farm related. He's talking about his bleak house and how his furniture doesn't quite fit in the hallway of his farmhouse. Like I say, it is his farmhouse, but it's not really talking about the pigs that it says on the front cover. I mean, that's a little bit misleading because I'd say there's only like 3 or 4 chapters in the entire book dedicated to just pig farming. The rest, I think, is a bit of filler. And this is what I mean. Look at this. Environmental donuts. So he's just talking about the paperwork that he has to do in order to push things through on the farm. Then we come to the last chapter that I just want to mention, which is this one here. A thing that seems very thingish. Something to do with Winnie the Pooh and how he used to play poo sticks. And that was just something that I really didn't expect from a car guy. Someone who talks about V8 engines and all of this, and then he talks about Winnie the Pooh and how he really enjoyed reading it to his kids. I thought that was really touching. That was a really nice inner of what Jeremy actually is all about. He's a family man at heart. He means what he says, and also he paints a really good picture. And he literally speaks about how he used to read the kids a certain Winnie the Pooh book, and how it actually made him laugh rather than the kids laugh, and that's why he read it to the kids. And I thought that was really funny. But overall, let's give this book a rating, I suppose. Let's say that this book, if you want to learn about farming, I would say go back and see my other review of Till the Cows Come Home, Jeremy's other book, because I feel like that is a book that really expresses how farming is important. Whereas I feel this book is kind of meant to be a follow-up, but it doesn't really talk a lot about the pigs themselves, even though that's what, you know, you're led to believe looking at the cover of the book. Never judge a book by the cover, but on this occasion I'd say definitely judge it on the cover, because although it shows pigs, he doesn't talk too much about them. So what would I give it out of 5? I'd say, like I said, it's not very informative in the sense of farming, but it is informative in the sense of learning about things that you probably didn't know, unless obviously you're keeping up with the sort of things of sewage being dumped into the seas and all of that. And I think it's very interesting how we can actually take this book and learn from it. Even if you pick this up in, say, 5 years' time, you can look back on it almost with a sense of looking back with hindsight on what should have been done in the moment, because farming could have changed in the next 5 years, and I can almost guarantee that it will. And I think it's very interesting that his points raised, especially with certain grants and things mentioned, like where the government fund his farm at some point, how a lot of farmers are getting those funds cut. It almost begs the question of how important do the government think farmers are? It begs the question of how do they see farmers actually looking after the land to produce crops for us? Like, would they rather do that, or would they rather make deals abroad? And that's the sort of thing that he's talking about in this book. So for that sense, I'd probably say this is a 4 out of 5 stars, because it is informative, and it makes you more politically aware of what's happening in the farming world. And that's what I think Jeremy is really good at, is the fact that he is a car guy at heart, but also he's come into this game of farming, and it's funny how he's actually really taken to it. but he's really expressing the points of how important certain things are in certain areas that a lot of people wouldn't have been aware of had this man not have gone into it. And I think that's something that we can thank Jeremy for, number one. But number two, I'd say we can thank him for also being able to lose money to almost make a statement of how important it is. And that's what I think is great about it, which is why it's important to go and buy this book, because you're almost helping him keep the awareness going, because once you buy this book, it means that he can put more fuel in his Lamborghini tractor, and that means that he can make a TV show to make more people aware how farmers are getting screwed over. So I'd say go out and get the book, even if you don't like it as much as I did. I'd say it's definitely worth it still, and you'd definitely be helping towards the awareness campaign of how farming is important. So there we are, 4 out of 5 stars, fantastic book. And if you got anything from this, make sure you like and subscribe down below. If you didn't, then make sure that you dislike it, because these videos are subjective, and obviously you might rate this a 1 out of 5. Although I've said it's a 4 out of 5, it doesn't mean that it's right, because it's subjective, and that's what I love about a book review. So if you want to catch more like that on the channel, like I said, subscribe. If you like this, press the like button. Anyway, thanks very much for watching, and hopefully catch you on the channel very, very soon in whatever video that may be. See you soon. Cheers.